Friends, you have tuned to Tunnel of Dark Narrations. Thank you. I'm Turk Strongman, channel creator, owner, and operator. If you desire continued horror, look here for at least one new video per week, usually on Fridays. And please give the thumb up. That'll show everybody that you like anything that you like. And I humbly request that you subscribe to the channel and click on the new upload notification bell. Please also remember, though, to keep checking back in case the new upload notification feature doesn't actually notify you. I'm smoking a pipe here, so just give me a second. Tobacco. Okay. Now, our present story, called Death Squat by Tunnel of Dark Narrations, it arises from a true one, and it contains adult themes, so consider yourself warned. Now, we apologize for the omission of opening and closing music here in this video, and don't worry over not seeing anything here. Here's the thing. We want you with the story's words solely, and with the lights off. There is only the story. Now on with the show. My best friend, Spencer, wrote my favorite poem ever. Spencer and I we'd take over condemned buildings in the avenues B, C, and D area, which we also called Alphabet City, right around there, of the Lower East Side in New York City, and then we'd move into them. The rent was free, and if we did it right, our places of residence remained unknown to others, and we could do what we wanted with our places. We could do what we wanted in our places, our carved-out habitats. They served as our private sanctuaries. Some people call such places squats. Well, having such advantages involves sacrifice. The acquisition and protection of sanctuary can be lethal. Sometimes heaven and hell exist side by side, you know, and sometimes one of them exists smack in the middle of the other. Excuse me again. So, neighborhood law enforcement had only minimal and insignificant influence in Alphabet City at that time. Creativity and volatility worked it together. We often had to take the law into our own hands. And just between you and I here, Spencer and I preferred that. Sanctuary in the middle of hell on earth is a precious thing. And self-preservation works best under one's own control. A man had to stand at the ready. Matters could explode quickly and with cunning. Besides, in continuous raw survival mode, Spencer and I felt the most alive. And here's an example of it all. One night, I put out my candles as usual and I got in bed. I always slept with my clothes on and one eye open. I mean it, one eye open. Somebody even told me once that I scared the bejesus out of him because my one eye kept staring at him while he tried to sleep on the floor next to my mattress. And yet, he said, I snored on. Well, I guess I did that. Right up until he lightly touched a paper bag in which I kept only a comb. At the slight sound, I awoke, leaping at him and shouting, "What the fuck do you want?" He was twice my size, but he jumped back with his hands up in surrender. "I just want to comb my hair. I couldn't sleep. You kept staring right at me with one eye while your other one stayed closed. I got creeped out." I told him he should be more careful. And the sleeping with my clothes on thing, it kept me warm in the winter and ready for action all year around. My clothes included jungle warfare boots, tiger-striped bandanas tied around my pant legs at the bottom to help avoid snagging on sharp objects sticking out of rubble or in a scrap for life in the rubble, and self-made wristbands for added utility. Well, all right. I heard Spencer come up the dark steps. Our chosen quarters were on the 4th floor out of 6 floors in all. We had cleared out spaces for ourselves in side-by-side apartment. The building had previously burned, and then it got ransacked. Who knows how many times it got ransacked. And then junkies and winos had infested it, largely in the dark. Well, we'd thrown them out, and it took me almost a week to clear out one room for myself and to clean some of the smoke damage off its brick walls as far up as I could reach. In the end, I pretty much liked the way it looked. Sometimes at night, Spencer and I would sit at an old workbench I had dragged up from the vacant lot across the street, and by candlelight, we'd sit there and write poetry inspired by the atmosphere. So yeah, okay, I had put out my candles and got in bed, and I heard Spencer come up, and he went into his apartment next door. Then I heard Spencer say, "Oh, shit." Well, I knew why he'd said it. I'd got lucky a few hours earlier. I'd been hanging out with a crowd of skinheads, punk rockers, hippies, and Jesus freaks on the corner of Avenue A and St. Mark's Place. Hang on here a second. Got to drink a little bit of this orange soda here. There we go. All right. I'd been hanging out over there, and I saw a young woman who definitely was not from around there, sitting on the sidewalk and leaning up against a wall. Her face pointed downwards, and she had thrown up on her nice clothes. Her hair was fire orange colored and long and thick. She was passed out drunk, and she wore a wedding ring. Well, I figured it was high time to play the hero and to save her from the impending slimy grasps and ill intents of bad guys, and also to taste another man's rhubarb at the same time. Win-win all the way around. I'd have carried her to my sanctuary. She said her name was Jenny, and I uncovered the fact that Jenny's carpet matched her drapes. And so I stole her panties, and then later I'd placed them on Spencer's pillow next door. After his "oh shit" about the panties, which he most likely found out about only by unwittingly settling his nose right into them, he came out and stood outside my door and called me an asshole. And he asked where she is. I told him I'd taken her back out, and that her name is not she, but that her name is Jenny, and that Jenny has flame orange hair that pretty much just spreads everywhere. And then he called me an asshole again. And he said I'm shitty. I laughed pretty hard. And I said she wasn't any of his business anyway, because she's married and probably lives in some nice house somewhere out in Queens. Spencer said, "Damn, man, stop. Just stop." But I didn't. I went on, and I reminded him that love is the law, love under will. That's what he had written on the wall a few feet up from his pillow, just above where he'd, fashioned a little alcove by knocking out a few bricks. He'd laid a Barbie doll in there and suspended a mannequin hand over it, palm down. Now the quote, "Love is the law, love under will," originally stated by Aleister Crowley, also known as the wickedest man on earth. Well, Spencer had actually burnt the quote into a piece of wood, which he then affixed to the wall. And then just below it, he'd also covered over the alcove with a little cloth overall, making the whole display under the inscription, well, including the inscription, like a secret and magical thing. He thought it was hilarious, and he thought it was a tad wrong at the same time, which is part of why he thought it was hilarious. Well, I agreed with him about it. But now he could also place Jenny's fresh panties in there with Barbie, and cover her naked body with them, and to sleep soundly while Sugar Plums dance in his head. My walls didn't have such a fanciful arrangement, and the only thing written over my bed was in big ugly letters. And it said, "If we catch you, gonna kill you." I heard Spencer's door go shut a little hard. I imagined him over there shaking his head slightly, with his lower jaw stuck out and off to one side a bit, and with a half-crazed look in his eyes that smacked of mentally rehearsing possible avenues of revenge against me. And yet also with a hint of a grin over there, mostly over my nerve, me having rubbed such a thing in his face that way. Well, all right. Then I didn't hear anything else. Nothing. It was all quiet, and then I faintly detected somebody climbing in a busted-out window down on the first floor on the rear courtyard side of our building. I could hear that just a little bit. Spencer and I both quietly emerged from our doors at the same time. I whispered to him that I had my stiletto in my hand, and he said that he had a candle and a lighter. And then we stood there in the blackness and waited. We heard some scuffling around down there, and some grunts as the invader crashed into some sharp booby traps we had placed here and there. Then we heard a slow creeping up the stairs, floor after floor. A couple times, whoever it was swore under his breath as he slipped through missing steps. That's always a good one. Finally, he got to the narrow hallway just below us, and he kind of tiptoed to right where we could have spit down on him. And we stood against the stairwell's wooden handrail, about 6 feet over this guy's head. Spencer called out with his throat wide open for the best respect commanding effect, "Yo, who is it?" It takes a lot of courage to creep into and then through such a building at night. Either that or a healthy dose of insanity. I thought the stranger might make some sound, something, in surprise, but no. Everything just went dead quiet. Not a sound ensued in the building for about 10 seconds, while we let this guy consider his situation. At about the time when he might have thought he could somehow continue on his mission, I slowly breathed out the words, "Who are you?" Still nothing. So I filled the guy in a bit more on the situation at hand. This is our building. We live here. Turn around, go back down, and leave. If you come up here, we're going to kill you. Still nothing. Spencer lit his candle and held it forward. We couldn't see past it, but it illuminated our faces as we peered from under our tilted hat rims toward the spot where the guy obviously stood within 2 arms' reach. Spencer calmly said, "Yo, we can't see you, but you can see us. From now on, if you see us out in the streets, you will know it. And who knows? We might save your life someday. So go on back out. This building is ours." In a few seconds, the intruder slinked back down and on out. We know he went on out because we went down and checked everywhere. And he never came back. Here's the thing. Like I said, the acquisition and protection of sanctuary, it can be lethal. I just wanted you to know what I had meant by that. By that, yeah, and also by the vital feeling of survival. Survival under love and will. A feeling which Spencer and I held sacred, and about which we wrote our poetry, and due to which we made our own wristbands out of snakeskin, thorns, and bones, and for which we lived our lives as sworn brothers, come heaven or hell or both. Okay, now, after I later went into the Navy, where I worked as a surface ship weapon fire controlman, I came back to visit Spencer anytime I could. I'd always find him quickly without much effort. No cell phones or anything at the time. I'd see him before he saw me, so I'd wait for him to notice me. And when he would, he'd always exclaim, "Oh, shit!" And we would silently and motionlessly hug each other like true brothers do. But each time I visited him, he emanated less contentment than the time before. His squats declined in appeal as well. Sometimes I felt sorry for having just got up and resigned from my post in Alphabet City the way I did, the day I'd walked up to Times Square and enlisted in the military. But I never mentioned it to Spencer that I felt like that. No. One of the last times, maybe it was the last time, I'm not sure, that I ever saw Spencer. I found him in a nice enough squat, though, but he had a really troubled look. And he took me over to another squat that he said was his, but didn't stay in anymore. He didn't talk much as we walked to it. Summed up, the walk there felt solemn, grave, like marching to a funeral. When we got to the front of the building, he said, "Now, please don't tell anybody about anything that you see upstairs." I promised him that I wouldn't say anything. In fact, right now is the first time I've ever said anything about it to anybody. The squat upstairs was really bad. I'm not talking about the structure, no, the building, but the conditions inside his squat. He said that since we'd seen each other last, he'd had a girlfriend who he still loves with all of his heart, just like she still loves him with all of hers. But he said she's a really bad junkie, and she got sick from it over time, really sick. So he'd watch over her, right up there in their increasingly foul place. And now she's dying in Beth Israel Hospital. Well, evidence of her lifestyle in the squat was total. When we got up there, we had to squeeze through the door to get inside. A broken toilet stood in the way, and debris jammed under the door, making a gritty scraping sound that I really didn't like. The one-time bathroom was just a few feet away, and now the sewer downpipe stuck up a few inches from the cracked floor next to a wall, rusted and broken off, and where the toilet had once rested, there was just a hole. A narrow passage ran from the door to the living room, off in a slightly different direction there. piled head high on both sides of this narrow passage was trash, so compacted it formed a solid mass. Broken glass laid everywhere, and here and there some pieces of wood projected from the heaps of the whatever, with partly bent nails sticking out. In the living room, red paint or something had got spattered on the decaying walls, and dust stood thick on the floor and everything else, probably from the falling plaster and the brittle horsehair that used to hold it together. Piss-filled quart-sized beer bottles sat in the cardboard cases in which they'd originally come. There were numerous of those cases laying around. In addition to the spatterings of red, dribbly writing with black printer's ink gel spelled out the despair and the tragedy on the plaster areas that remained intact. The astral presence of unfathomable heaviness felt physical, and the air, while of course invisible, at the same time looked lifeless. My gaze took it all in. Spencer's focused on mine. And then something scratched around over where the bathroom used to be, where we just passed by. Spencer said it's all right, that he used to shoot them with his pellet gun, so now they don't go far from the broken sewer line. But I wasn't really concerned about that. I used to do that too, one place where I'd lived. A ripped up couch stood in the center of the room, the only piece of furniture there. The couch was all red in color. I went to sit on it, but Spencer warned me to be careful. So I stopped and I stood back up straight. He asked me what color the couch is. I said red. But he said, no, it's white. So I asked him, how so? He took a bit to answer me. He took a moment. His countenance went from solemn to the same as the air in the room. Then he explained that the couch was nice and white when he'd found it. And now this was her blood, soaked all the way through it. She'd lay on it, and she'd dig in her naked body with syringes. And she'd draw out blood and squirt it on the walls. And then she'd bury the syringes inside the couch cushions and in its back and in its arms. And then she'd just nod out and bleed. He said he stayed by her side and took care of her loyally all the while. And that since she'd gone to the hospital, where they told him she's never come back home, since then, he'd come back here many times by himself to fish out the bare syringes and wrap them up and throw them away. He said he found about 150, but there still might be more. And he reminded me that she was the first real girlfriend he'd ever had. And he said that through her, he discovered that girlfriends are a good thing because they've always got your back. I nodded in understanding. And then I told him again that I'd never tell anybody what I saw. And then we didn't move for a moment. But then he broke the silence. I just have one more thing to tell you. I wrote a poem about all this. I asked him to tell it to me. He said, okay, it's just one word. Damn. Well, I told him that as far as I know, that's the best poem anybody ever wrote. And then we left, I went back to my naval base. A little while later, I heard that somebody set fire to Spencer and killed him in his sleep in a private shack that he'd pieced together in the back of a littered lot. Spencer's the best man who ever lived. Damn. Thanks for listening to Death Squat, friends. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you felt the horror of the true story from which it arose. I'd really appreciate it if you give the story a big thumb up below the video. And I welcome your comments further down. I just ask that when you write them, you keep an open mind and respect others. If you like this channel, feel free to support it by subscribing to it. And please always check back for uploads. Lastly now, amid the noisy, confusing haste of this old world, its ghostly shadows of the past, and its vague uncertainties about the future, strive to stay alive, to be well, and to find peace in your restless souls. I'm Turk Strongman. Thank you for tuning to Tunnel of Dark Narration.